Many years ago, there was a group organized by the Reverend Jan Eller Isaacs, a minister who had served the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Oakland with her husband, Rob. May they rest in blessed memory. But by this time, Jan was, I think, in the Twin Cities with Rob. The program that she helped start was called Dreaming Big. And the 20 or so of us ministers called ourselves the Big Dreamers, laughing a bit at ourselves. The truth is that we were mostly folks younger in our tenure in the profession, and many of us were serving small congregations with just a couple ministers thrown in who were new to the profession but had just been called to big churches and needed to get equipped fast for their work. All of us, however, were united in our interest in serving larger and more complicated institutions and interested and curious about the possibilities of that. Susan Frederick Gray, who became UUA president, she was in that group. Rosemary Bray McNatt, who's our president at Starr King School of the Ministry, about ready to retire, she was in the group. Most of us went on to make good use of the training wherever our calling took us. The structure of the program was to visit 6 large and vibrant congregations, Unitarian Universalist congregations, over 2 years, with retreats, each congregation known for some particular set of excellences that spiked, in addition to doing everything else well. Really dynamic religious education, cutting-edge justice work, fantastic worship. One of the congregations, All Souls Tulsa, had just folded in shortly before about 200 to 300 of the remaining members of a Black Pentecostal megachurch when the minister of that congregation, Bishop Carlton D. Pearson, may he rest in blessed memory, had a revelation that God would save, loved, and would save all people. A Universalist revelation that his congregation, many of its members, a theological shift that they couldn't accept, and so the church shrunk. At each stop, they had trainers brought in. It was this wealth of information and embodied experience, which I think is so powerful, about what vibrancy could look like and feel like in all its forms. And one of the biggest lessons came almost immediately in the program. Our first visit was to the First Parish Church in Concord, Massachusetts. Anybody seen that enormous, impressive church in New England? It dates back to 1636, though it's had a few different buildings. A church where Emerson and Thoreau were members and lived nearby. We were all new, all of us fresh with our assumptions of what it would mean to be minister to a congregation like this, what that person should look like. The minister at the time, the senior minister, the Reverend Gary Smith, is a famously gifted preacher. And the service we saw that Sunday was expertly led and woven together. But in the time for all ages, Gary let himself, I'm sure with advance permission, be brought out, and he sat on a stool, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but as she was telling the story, the DRE, the Director of Religious Education, put him in some very silly outfit, and he played a role in the story that got lots of robust laughter. In our debrief afterwards, there was enormous energy and critique in the room about whether Gary Smith had diminished his leadership aura in that moment. We had all kinds of strong opinions about what senior leadership, what leadership should look like, what it demanded. And we went around in this circle that got increasingly energized and even caustic until finally one member of the group, I think it might have been Elizabeth Lerner McClay, whose reading we used this morning, said, I don't know why we're debating this, whether Gary is a large church minister. Gary leads a vibrant, large church. The room grew silent, and my head and heart did too, as the doors and windows flew open to all my assumptions about what leadership looked like, or should look like, or would require, or should require. And my heart and head stayed open throughout the program and until today. And we would go on to visit churches with cerebral, introverted, and somewhat less warm and relational ministers who led vibrant houses of worship. And we would meet with folksy, humble, but also gutsy younger ministers who led vibrant congregations. And we would meet with co-ministers who managed to juggle and share leadership across life and family together and led a vibrant congregation. And we saw so many models of ministry, and we met so many members of the congregation, lay leaders. We saw so many models of ministry and leadership. Like this morning, where we heard from just three examples of people who are leaders. But we know in our 270 official members, we have 270 examples of the shape and the form that leadership can take. Just like the partial list in our card, in our handout, thanks to Courtney, who's one of our resident leaders of leaders. We have creatives, and we have people who keep us on time. We have people who, to expand the list, check the numbers, and people who watch out for legal risk. We have people who question authority, right, Linda? I mean, Linda doesn't do it, actually, but she named it. She's actually the other part of this. And we have people who support those in leadership and authority so that they don't do the work alone. We have singers who stand up here and lead us in songs, and we have everyone who joins in lustily, so the place comes alive with music. We have people who speak on justice issues, knowledgeable and passionate, and those who show up to make signs and to be at rallies and gatherings whenever and wherever bodies are needed on the streets to communicate communal power and concrete moral commitment. We have people who bake, and we have people who, thank goodness, clean up after the bakers. People who make sure the space looks extraordinarily beautiful. And people who make sure the walls are earthquake-proof and the roof won't leak. Maybe you already know this, but if you don't, let this be a moment that you hear something that has always been true about church that Linda also alluded to in her reflection. The secret of church isn't this thing you and I are sitting in and of itself. I'm always amazed when people say, well, the church will do that. And I'm like, who is the church? It's not a building, right? It's all of us. And it's here not just because we pay our pledges, that we need our pledges, or not just because you're sitting here on Sunday mornings, but it really wouldn't mean much if we were playing to an empty house. And we have staff that's the scaffolding and lay leaders who are the scaffolding, but that's only part, those people who hold up the scaffolding. Everything else is real and happens and has heft and vision and embodied, incarnate muscle and heft and life and breath because of what each of us does. We are loving because people lead in love. We are welcoming because people lead some of us to be welcoming to the stranger. We are generous because people lead with generosity in their lives, of their time and their treasure. We are courageous because people lead boldly, putting themselves and their beliefs out in the world in ways that can be seen and felt. That old thing we learned as a kid, so silly, so true. You remember it? See if I can get this right. This is the church. This is the. But what matters, and what leadership means, and what it takes in infinite forms is what happens when we open the doors and we. And we're so much better looking than this, by the way. Yeah, we have to throw open the doors and windows of our notions of what a leader looks like. And just look at each other and just look in the mirror. And so thank you all for your leadership. Nominating all of us, we invite you to see it. We invite you to deepen in it. We invite you to play expansively, explore what other forms it might take, whatever capacities you might uncover with what it means to step in as a leader. Plow your vision more and more into our shared life, because that is the essence of shared ministry. And we have this inherited legacy of what in old-timey language is called the priesthood and prophethood of all believers. And that's really what leadership has always meant. We all bless the world and call out prophetically for who we hope and yearn we will be together. Just that. And that.